The starship descended slowly toward the alien capital, its engines humming like a deep drumbeat in the cold air. Lieutenant Marcus Hale sat by the window, staring at the glittering towers of the Zyari city below. The buildings rose like crystal, spears catching the light of two suns. The world was strange and beautiful, but Marcus had no time to admire the view. His orders were simple: guard the human delegation during the peace talks. Nothing more. The ship touched down on a landing platform carved from black stone. Soldiers of the Zyari stood in rows, their armor reflecting the sun's. Their faces were long and sharp, with eyes like glowing embers. They were known across the galaxy as conquerors, and even though today was about peace, Marcus could feel the tension in the air. The human delegation stepped out first, diplomats dressed in formal suits. Behind them came the soldiers, Marcus included, ready to protect them if anything went wrong. He kept his rifle strapped across his back but walked with calm steps, trying not to show nerves. Then he saw her, the alien queen, Zelara. She sat on a throne carried by 6 armored guards. Her body was tall and elegant, draped in robes that shimmered like liquid silver. A crown of black crystal rested on her head. Her face was smooth, cold, and unreadable, but her eyes were the most dangerous thing about her. They glowed with a strange fire, sharp enough to cut through lies, strong enough to bend weaker minds. When she spoke, her voice carried across the landing platform like thunder wrapped in silk. "Humans," she said, "you stand before me not as rulers, not as equals but as guests. Remember that." The diplomats bowed deeply. The soldiers behind them lowered their heads, all except Marcus. He was staring at her not out of defiance but out of something else he could not explain. Her movements were regal, but there was a small twitch in her left brow when she looked at the humans. Her lips curved in a way that seemed almost awkward, and before he could stop himself, the word slipped out of his mouth. "Cute." The sound was quiet, almost like a whisper. He thought maybe no one heard. But the queen's glowing eyes turned and locked onto him. The platform fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. "What?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Did you just call me?" Marcus froze. His heart pounded in his chest, but for some reason his mouth did not stay shut. "I said, cute." Gasps ran through the alien soldiers. The human diplomats looked horrified. No one dared to insult the queen. And yet here was one human soldier standing there with calm eyes, calling the most feared ruler in the galaxy something so small. The queen's aura flared. A wave of heat rolled across the platform, and the black stone cracked under her throne. Her guards raised their weapons. Her robe shifted as if alive, pulsing with energy. "You dare mock me?" she hissed. Marcus swallowed but stood his ground. "I don't mean mockery, just an observation." Her hand rose slowly. A faint red glow surrounded it. For a moment, Marcus thought she might crush him with a single gesture. He had seen alien leaders before, but none of them looked this furious. None of them looked this dangerous. And yet, somewhere inside that fury, Marcus saw something else. He saw her expression stiffen not just from rage, but from something deeper, hurt. He could not explain it, but it was there, hidden behind her burning eyes. The diplomats tried to intervene. "Your Majesty, forgive him," one stammered. "He is young, untrained in your customs." "Silence," the queen snapped, her voice shaking the air. The diplomat nearly fell to his knees. Her attention returned to Marcus. "Human, do you wish to end your life today? Is that why you speak this way? Do you know who I am?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I know. You're Queen Zelara, ruler of the Zyari, feared across a dozen systems, the one whose armies have crushed empires. Yes, I know." "Then why?" Her voice was sharp as a blade. "Why speak such insult to me?" Marcus paused, then gave a small, almost awkward smile. "Because I don't think it's an insult." The guards stepped forward, their weapons humming. But the queen lifted one finger, and they froze. Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. You will come before me, she commanded. Marcus stepped forward. The heat of her aura pressed against his skin like fire, but he did not falter. When he stood close, he could see the faint marks of exhaustion beneath her eyes. The crown on her head was heavy, almost too heavy for her slender frame. She leaned forward, her voice low so only he could hear. Say it again. Marcus hesitated, then spoke softly. Cute. The queen's expression changed. Her lips tightened, her eyes flashed, and for a moment Marcus thought she might tear him apart. The ground beneath them shook, and cracks spread, outward like lightning. The humans backed away. The alien guards knelt in fear. The queen rose from her throne, her tall form towering above him. The air vibrated with her power. You dare to call me this word in front of my people, she said. Then you will learn what terror truly means. The crystals of the nearby towers began to hum. The sky darkened, though the sun still burned. A shadow spread across the city, and her aura grew like a storm. Marcus clenched his fists. He felt fear creeping up his spine, but he stood still. He had survived battles before, but this was different. She wasn't just showing strength. She was showing the kind of power that could break worlds. And yet, he looked at her and did not see only terror. He saw something else, something he could not name. The queen lifted her hand higher. Energy sparked around her fingers. The platform shook violently, and the diplomats screamed. But Marcus did not scream. He simply whispered, almost too quiet for anyone else to hear. You're terrifying, yes, but still cute. The queen froze. Her hand stopped glowing. Her eyes widened just slightly, and her aura faltered for a heartbeat. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. Her guards stared at her in confusion. The humans stood paralyzed. The queen's expression twisted between rage and disbelief, and in that moment, something began to shift. Not just in her, but in the fate of everyone. Standing there, the silence stretched long after Marcus spoke. Every alien soldier on the platform kept their heads bowed, too afraid to breathe. The humans froze, waiting for the moment when the queen would strike him down. But Queen Zilara did not strike. Her hand still hovered in the air, glowing faintly, her long fingers trembling. She had destroyed cities for smaller insults. Entire fleets had burned when rulers had dared to call her weak. And yet here was one human, standing before her without fear, calling her a word she hated most, and something inside her refused to kill him. Her voice, when it finally came, was deep and low. You are either the bravest human I have ever seen, or the most foolish. Marcus bowed his head slightly, but not too much. Maybe both, he admitted. The guards shifted uneasily. They had never seen their queen hesitate. She always punished disrespect with instant death, but now she stood frozen, her aura flaring and fading like a storm that could not decide where to strike. Finally, she turned sharply. Take him, she ordered. Two guards stepped forward, their armor clanking. They seized Marcus by the arms and began dragging him across the platform. The humans shouted, but the queen silenced them with one glance. This one is mine, she said coldly. He will answer for his words in my throne hall. The diplomats dared not resist. The alien soldiers surrounded them, and the group was escorted into the towering crystal palace at the center of the city. The halls of the palace stretched endlessly, glowing faintly with an inner light. The walls seemed alive, pulsing softly, as if the palace itself breathed. Marcus walked with steady steps between the guards, his eyes flicking from one strange sight to another. He had never seen architecture like this before, both beautiful and unsettling. At last they entered the throne chamber. It was vast, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadows. A river of molten light ran down the center, glowing gold, casting reflections across the black floor. The throne itself rose from a platform of crystal and bone, sharp and terrifying, as though carved from the remains of ancient beasts. The guards shoved Marcus to the center of the hall. Queen Zilara walked past him, her robes dragging across the floor, her aura filling the chamber with heat and pressure. She sat upon her throne and leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Human, she said, you stand alone in my hall. Speak honestly, for your words will decide whether you live or die. Why do you call me that word? Her eyes glowed, and Marcus felt the weight of her will pressing against him like a heavy stone. It would have crushed any other man, but he held steady. Because, he said slowly, that's how I see you. Not weak, not small, just different than what everyone else sees. Her lips curled. Different? You terrify everyone. You command respect through fear. But sometimes, when you move, when you speak, there's something else there. Something softer. Maybe you don't show it, but I noticed. And that word is the only one I have for it. The Queen's expression darkened. The throne room rumbled. The molten river rose in sharp waves, splashing sparks. You think to look into me, she whispered, her voice dangerous. You dare to claim you see something no one else does? Insolent human. She raised her hand again. But this time, instead of energy, a deep vibration filled the chamber. The walls glowed brighter. Marcus felt something crawl into his mind, sharp, cold, powerful. She was inside his head. The Queen's psionic power wrapped around his thoughts like chains. Memories flickered before his eyes, his childhood on Earth, his training as a soldier, battles fought in burning skies. He tried to resist, but the force was overwhelming. You will not lie to me, she said. I will see for myself what truth lies in your heart. Marcus gritted his teeth. His vision blurred and the world around him shifted. Suddenly he was standing on a battlefield. Explosions thundered across a ruined city. Smoke burned his lungs. He saw himself running, dragging a wounded comrade to safety. The ground shook as alien weapons blasted holes in the earth. The Queen's voice echoed through the vision. You fear death. You fear loss. Like all humans, you are weak inside. Marcus shouted over the roar. I've lost plenty, yes, but fear isn't what stops me. It's what drives me to keep moving. The scene shifted. Now he was in a dark room. His unit had been wiped out. He sat alone, cleaning his weapon, eyes hollow with grief. The Queen appeared in front of him, her form taller, sharper, glowing like a god of war. This is the truth, she said. You are fragile. Your people die easily, and you cover your weakness with foolish words. Marcus stood and faced her. Even though she towered above him, he met her gaze. You call it weakness. I call it being human. We keep going even when we're broken. That's not fragility, that's strength. The Queen's eyes narrowed. She pushed deeper into his mind, showing him visions of his fears, his body torn apart by alien weapons, his homeworld burning, his family lost. Each image cut into him like a blade, but he laughed. The Queen froze. You laugh? Marcus nodded, his voice steady even inside the illusion. Because no matter what you show me, it doesn't change who I am, and it doesn't change what I see when I look at you. The vision cracked. The battlefield crumbled like glass, and the throne room reformed around them. Marcus was back on the black stone floor, breathing heavily, but still standing. The Queen sat unmoved, though her hands gripped the throne tightly. For the first time, her eyes did not burn with pure rage. Instead, they flickered with something else. Confusion. You resist my power, she said softly. You should be broken. You should be begging, yet you still stand. Marcus smiled faintly. Maybe humans are tougher than you think. The Queen leaned back in her throne. The silence in the chamber was thick. The guards along the walls exchanged uneasy glances, waiting for her to decide his fate. At last, she spoke again. You are reckless. You insult me with words that no one else would dare speak, and yet you do not break. Her voice grew colder. But do not mistake my curiosity for mercy. You are still in my power, human. If I wished, I could crush your bones into dust where you stand. Marcus nodded. I believe that. But I also believe you won't. The Queen tilted her head slightly, intrigued despite herself. And why is that? Because, he said, calmly. If you really wanted me dead, I would already be gone. The fact that I'm still here means something else is keeping me alive. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's curiosity, or maybe— He paused, his eyes steady on hers. Maybe you just don't want to be seen only as terrifying. The Queen's lips tightened. Her aura flared again, but weaker than before. She looked at him long and hard, her glowing eyes trying to pierce every layer of his mind. But Marcus didn't flinch. Finally, she waved her hand. The guards lowered their weapons. Enough, she said. Her voice was steady, but softer than before. You will remain here. I have not finished with you yet. Marcus gave a small shrug. Fair enough. Her eyes narrowed again as though she wanted to be angry at his calmness but couldn't quite manage it. Take him to the holding chamber, she commanded her guards. He will remain until I call for him again. The guards moved quickly, but even as they led Marcus away, the Queen's gaze followed him. Her expression was unreadable, still sharp, still dangerous, but no longer pure rage. For the first time in many years, Queen Zalara felt something unfamiliar gnawing inside her chest. It was not anger, it was not hatred, it was something she could not name. Marcus sat alone in the holding chamber. The walls glowed faintly with lines of red crystal, forming shapes that shifted like living veins. There was no bed, no chair, just smooth black stone beneath him. The air was heavy, pressing against his chest as though the palace itself wanted to break him down. He leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. His arms still ached from where the guards had dragged him, but his mind was strangely calm. Most men in his position would be terrified. They would be praying for mercy or planning escape. But Marcus simply waited. He knew the Queen would return. Hours later, the door opened with a hiss. 2 guards entered, tall and silent, their armor shining with golden light. Between them stood Queen Zalara. She did not sit on her throne this time. She walked slowly into the chamber, her robes whispering against the stone. Her presence filled the room like a storm cloud. The guards bowed and left, the door sealing behind them. Marcus opened one eye. Back already? The Queen's eyes narrowed. Do you mock me again, human? Not mocking, Marcus said, just noticing. Her aura flared, the air heating, until sweat beaded on his forehead. She stepped closer, her shadow stretching across him. You test me, she said. You test the limits of my patience. Do you not understand that I could end you at any moment? Marcus slowly stood, brushing dust from his uniform. He met her gaze directly, even though it felt like staring into fire. I understand. But I also understand something else. And what is that? She demanded. That if you truly wanted me gone, you wouldn't waste your time speaking to me. Her jaw tightened. She lifted her hand, and suddenly the chamber shifted. The floor dissolved beneath him. The walls vanished, and Marcus found himself standing in a vast desert under a dark red sky. The wind howled with voices, and shadows crawled across the dunes. It was another illusion, another test of her power. The Queen appeared before him, taller than before, her body glowing with fire, her crown stretching into sharp horns. Her voice thundered across the desert. You will learn what it means to stand against me. The shadows rose, forming monstrous shapes with claws and teeth. They rushed at Marcus, screaming with voices of the dead. He raised his fists, ready to fight, but he knew they weren't real. They tore into him anyway, ripping at his skin, dragging him into the sand. Pain shot through him like lightning. The Queen's laughter echoed across the sky. Even the bravest human breaks in the end. Marcus gritted his teeth. He forced himself to stand, pushing against the weight of the shadows. His body shook, blood dripping from wounds that might not even exist. Is this all you've got? He shouted. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Marcus took a step forward, then another, dragging himself out of the sand. The monsters clawed at him, but he kept moving. You're trying so hard to scare me, to crush me, but you don't get it. Fear isn't enough. Fear doesn't decide who I am. The desert trembled. The shadows screeched. Marcus raised his voice, shouting over the storm. You can show me every nightmare, every death, every loss, but it doesn't change what I see in you. The illusions wavered. The shadows broke apart into dust. The desert cracked, light spilling through the ground. Suddenly, the chamber returned. Marcus was back on the black stone floor, his body whole again, though his clothes were soaked in sweat. The queen stood before him, her chest rising and falling quickly, her aura flickering like a dying flame. She had expected him to scream, to beg, to collapse, but he hadn't. For the first time in centuries, her illusions had failed. Marcus gave a weak smile. Not bad, but I've had worse dreams. The queen's voice was low, almost trembling. Why do you not break? Because, Marcus said, you're not just trying to scare me, you're trying to convince yourself. You want me to see you as only terrifying, but I don't. Her hands clenched at her sides. Do not speak as though you know me. I don't know you, Marcus admitted, but I can see you. And what I see is more than what you want me to see. The queen turned away sharply. Her robe flared as she moved, her crown catching the red light of the crystals. For a long moment she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. When I was young, I was not feared. I was not respected. They mocked me. They called me small, they called me weak. And I killed them. Every rival, every voice that dared insult me. I built my throne on their bones. I became terror itself. That is why I cannot allow your word. Marcus stepped closer, careful not to touch her. Because it reminds you of that time. Her eyes flashed. It reminds me of weakness. I cannot allow weakness. A queen must never appear soft. A queen must be a storm. Marcus shook his head. But storms don't last forever. Even the strongest storm passes. And when it does, what's left? Empty ground. Broken cities. Fear doesn't build anything, it only destroys. The queen spun toward him, fury burning in her eyes. Enough! You speak as though you understand the burden of a throne. You speak as though your small human life compares to mine. Her aura flared again, but Marcus did not step back. I don't compare, he said firmly. I just know that ruling through fear makes you lonely. And no matter how terrifying you are, loneliness is something I recognize. Because I've felt it too. The queen froze. The fire in her eyes dimmed just slightly. Her aura wavered. Loneliness. It was a word she had never allowed herself to think about. She ruled over billions, commanded fleets, bent galaxies to her will, and yet, she was always alone. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. You are reckless, human. You speak truths you should not, and yet, I cannot silence you. Marcus gave a small shrug. Maybe that's why you brought me here, not to punish me, but to see if I would say what no one else dares. The queen looked at him long and hard. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in centuries, Queen Zelara did not know what to say. She turned away, her robe swirling around her. You will remain here tonight. Tomorrow, I will decide your fate. The door opened. Guards entered and waited for her command. She walked past Marcus, but as she did, her hand brushed close to his arm, close enough that he could feel the heat of her power, but not close enough to touch. She left without another word. Marcus exhaled slowly. He sat back against the wall, his body shaking with exhaustion. He had survived another storm, but deep inside he knew this was only the beginning, because the queen was no longer just furious. She was conflicted, and that made her more dangerous than ever. Marcus spent the night in the holding chamber. The walls glowed faintly, but the air felt heavier than before. Sleep came in short bursts, filled with dreams of fire and shadows, visions the queen had planted in his mind. Yet he awoke with the same calm determination as before. The storm of her power could not shake him entirely. He had learned that even the strongest terror could be faced when you understood the heart behind it. By the time the suns rose over the Ziyari capital, casting sharp golden beams through the palace, he heard the soft sound of her footsteps. Queen Zelara entered without guards this time. She moved gracefully, though there was tension in the set of her shoulders. She sat across from him, not on her throne, but on the floor, knees bent, in a way that seemed human. Marcus blinked. He had never seen a ruler of her power appear so exposed. "You survived last night," she said quietly, her voice lacking its usual fire. "I expected you to break." "I didn't," Marcus said, "because I don't break so easily. Fear doesn't control me." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching. "You speak boldly for a human, even after witnessing my power. Tell me, why do you call me cute? Surely now you see what I'm capable of." Marcus considered. He had seen her destroy illusions, bend reality, and crush nightmares into nothing. Yet he remembered her moments of hesitation, the fleeting expressions that hinted at something softer, something behind the storm. "Because I see you as more than what you show," he said. "You are terrifying, yes, you are powerful. You command armies and fear across the galaxy, but you are also alive in ways that matter. I notice the small things, the way your eyes narrow when you think, the way you move when no one else is watching, the way your voice softens even when you try not to show it. That's why I call you cute." The Queen's glowing eyes narrowed. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but could not. She had spent centuries commanding fear and respect, and no one had ever dared interpret her in this way. Her chest rose and fell quickly. You dare to see me as weak?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to sound strong. Marcus shook his head. "Not weak. Human beings don't see weakness the way your people do. To us, something can be small or delicate and still be strong. It can be precious and admired. That's what I mean. Cute isn't a word of insult, it's recognition." Recognition. The Queen repeated the word in her mind, tasting its meaning as though it were foreign air. She had been mocked as a child for being small, for being the youngest in her line, for her size compared to her rivals. She had spent her life erasing any hint of that weakness with terror. Her people feared her, but no one had ever looked at her and truly understood her. Marcus's words pressed against her like sunlight through storm clouds. She had expected him to quiver, to beg, to call her powerful and nothing else. Yet he had not. He had seen her, and he had chosen a word she hated not to mock, but to show a kind of respect alien to her people. For the first time, the Queen did not know how to respond. Her aura flickered, a soft heat replacing the usual storm. "Do you understand what it means to rule through fear?" she asked finally. "I think I do," Marcus said. "You build obedience with terror. People follow because they are afraid of what you will do. But they do not respect you. They do not see you. They only fear what you might become if you lose control. That's not true strength. True strength inspires, even if it terrifies. But it must also show what lies beneath the armor." The Queen's hands tightened into fists. Her mind raced. She had never considered that perspective. Her armies, her fleets, her empire, all built on fear, had given her obedience. Yes, but also loneliness. And Marcus had named it without hesitation. "You speak of things you do not understand," she said, her voice sharper now, trying to regain her usual authority. "I understand enough," Marcus said calmly. "I know fear. I know what it does to people. I also know what it does to those who wield it. You're strong, yes, but you are lonely because no one sees the real you. They only see the storm. I see the storm, and what's inside it. That's why I call you cute." The Queen's glowing eyes flickered like embers. Her mouth opened, then closed. A long silence followed. She had spent centuries avoiding this feeling, this notion that someone might perceive her as more than power. She was the Queen of Terror, the ruler of Zayari. No human had ever dared speak so openly to her, much less so truthfully. "You," she began and then stopped. "Why do you not fear me?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Because fear is not the only way to see someone. I can fear you, yes, and respect your power, but I can also see your life, your struggles, and the person beneath it all. I call you cute because I see the real you, not just the mask you wear for your empire." The Queen looked away for a moment, silent. Her chest rose and fell, slower now, almost thoughtful. She had expected him to bow, to beg, to shiver. Instead, he had spoken truth, bold and unwavering. And though it infuriated her pride, it also stirred something she could not name. "You are reckless," she said finally. "No one in my court would survive speaking this way. You could have been destroyed many times over." "I know," Marcusy said. "But here I am, and I'm still standing." She leaned forward slightly, her glowing eyes fixing on him. "And yet, you do not break. Even under my illusions, under my power, you endure." "Why?" Marcus looked at her steadily. "Because fear is temporary. What you show the world is terrifying, yes, but it does not define everything about you. I see more. And I will not let fear control me." The queen stared at him. Her fingers twitched. She wanted to strike, to crush, to force him to bend. But she could not. Not fully. His words had penetrated something she had spent centuries guarding. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "there is truth in what you say. Perhaps the storm is not all I am." Marcus nodded. "Storms are beautiful, yes, but even the strongest storms pass. And what remains afterward can be built, nurtured, protected. You can be terrifying and admired, powerful and respected, even loved." The queen blinked, caught off guard by the last word. She had never considered that humans, or anyone, might feel admiration or affection for her beyond fear. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed together. She lowered her gaze, unaccustomed to silence and reflection. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The chamber held only their presence and the faint glow of the walls. Marcus realized something remarkable. The queen was not angry now. She was curious, conflicted, and that made her more dangerous than ever. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but deliberate. "You will remain in my presence, not as a prisoner, but as someone I must study. Your perspective is unusual." Marcus stood, brushing himself off. "I'll do what I can to survive your study." A faint smile, almost imperceptible, curved her lips. "You have survived more than any human should. Perhaps there is something to be learned from your resilience." She rose from the floor, her tall figure radiating authority again, though the tension in her shoulders had eased slightly. "Tonight you will dine with me. You will speak, and I will observe. Perhaps by the end, I will understand why you dare speak so boldly." Marcus nodded. "I'll try not to disappoint your majesty." She studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes sharp yet thoughtful. "You may call me what you called me before if you must, but choose your words carefully, and remember, they carry weight." Marcus smiled faintly. "Understood. I think you'll like what I see." The queen turned sharply, moving toward the door. "Prepare yourself. The world beyond this room is dangerous, and not all fear comes from me." As the door closed behind her, Marcus leaned back against the wall and exhaled. He had survived her illusions, endured her tests, and spoken truths no one had dared to name. Yet he knew the hardest part was still to come, because the queen had begun to see something she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. The possibility that strength and fear were not the only ways to rule. That perhaps someone small, fragile, human, could see her differently. And that realization terrified her more than anything else. The palace was quiet as Marcus was led through the glowing corridors. The air felt thick, but it was no longer suffocating. Queen Zelara walked ahead, her robes swaying with purpose. Marcus sensed a shift in her presence. The fury that had burned so brightly in the last days now simmered beneath a fragile layer of curiosity. "You have survived much, human," she said finally, "and yet you continue to speak as though you see me clearly. Why? What compels you to risk your life so boldly?" Marcus met her gaze. "Because fear is not the only thing that matters. I can respect your power. I can acknowledge your fury, but I also see what others refuse to see. I see the real you." She stopped suddenly, her glowing eyes narrowing. "The real me? You are reckless, human. You speak of truths no one has dared name. And yet somehow you remain alive. Why should I not destroy you for your insolence?" Marcus stepped closer. "Because destroying me changes nothing. But listening, understanding, it can change everything." The Queen paused, considering his words. For centuries, she had ruled through fear. Entire fleets had bent to her command, armies had followed her without question, and empires had trembled at the mere mention of her name. And yet, this human, fragile, small, but unyielding, had endured her tests and dared to speak to her. "As an equal, you endure," she murmured almost to herself. "And you do not flinch at my power. Why?" "Because fear is temporary," Marcus said. "It can be broken, but respect, understanding, those last. And I see more than your power. I see your heart, your struggles, the parts of you no one else notices." The Queen's chest rose and fell rapidly. She had never considered that someone could perceive her in this way. Her empire was built on obedience through terror, yet Marcus' words hinted at a different kind of recognition, one that no title or crown could grant. "You speak boldly for one so small," she said, her voice quivering slightly despite her effort to sound commanding. "You have survived trials that would crush any other, and you still see beyond the storm. Why?" "Because I choose to," Marcus replied. "I choose to see you not only as a queen but as a being capable of more. Terrifying, yes, but also remarkable." Her aura flickered faintly, the storm inside her calming in ways it never had before. She was used to absolute control, yet Marcus had survived her illusions, endured her power, and named a truth she had hidden even from herself. "You speak of things beyond your understanding," she said softly. "And yet, I cannot silence you. You have earned a presence in my court, human." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "So, I get to stay?" "For now," she said, a faint curve appearing on her lips, almost a smile. "You will remain not as a prisoner, not as a soldier, but as someone whose perspective intrigues me. You have seen me truly, and for that, I allow it." Marcus allowed himself a small grin. "I'll do my best not to disappoint." The Queen turned and gestured toward the balcony. Outside, the city sprawled beneath them, towers glowing in the soft evening light. The hum of life returned to the streets, but a shadow lingered, a threat on the horizon. Enemy ships, sleek and black, pierced the clouds above the capital, descending with deadly intent. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Looks like we won't be relaxing just yet." The Queen's aura flared, bright and hot. Energy pulses radiated from her, forming a protective shield over the city. Her soldiers scrambled to defend the streets, and Marcus moved alongside them, his human ingenuity complementing her raw power. They coordinated attacks, anticipated enemy movements, and turned the tide of battle with a combination of precision and instinct. Hours passed in a blur of energy beams, explosions, and clashing forces. The enemy was relentless, but so were the Queen and Marcus. He watched her command with an intensity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Every motion, every gesture was calculated to maximize impact while minimizing harm to her own people. "You fight well for a human," she said, glancing at him briefly amidst the chaos. "You fight well for a queen," Marcus replied. "And maybe a little differently than I expected." She raised an eyebrow, then focused again on the battle. Together they fought, not master and subject, not ruler and soldier, but allies united by respect and understanding. At last, the enemy began to retreat. Their ships shattered, fleeing into the void. The city trembled, but it had survived. The Queen exhaled slowly, the tension in her body easing. Marcus stood beside her, exhausted but steady. "You stood beside me," she said, her voice quieter now. "Through fear, through danger, Why? Because you're more than terrifying. Marcus replied, You're remarkable. I wanted to see that, even when everyone else only saw fear. For the first time in centuries, the queen allowed herself to smile fully. She had been called many things, ruler, conqueror, terror of the galaxy, but never remarkable, never seen in this way. Marcus had endured her wrath, her tests, and had done something no one else had done. He had confronted her with truth and emerged unbroken. You have changed something within me, she admitted. I brought you here to test, to punish, to terrify, and yet, you have endured. You have spoken truths I never allowed myself to hear. Marcus shrugged. Maybe someone needed to. The city below stirred as survivors emerged, witnessing the aftermath. They saw the queen's power, her fury, and now her restraint. They saw a ruler who could command the galaxy yet listen, reflect, and learn from a human. The queen turned to Marcus. You will remain here, she said firmly. Not as a prisoner, not as a soldier, but as someone who has earned my trust. You have seen me as I am, and that is no small thing. Marcus felt warmth in his chest, a mix of relief and pride. He had never expected recognition from one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And yet, here he was, not only surviving, but respected. Do you understand? The queen asked. I do, Marcus said. Thank you. She studied him for a long moment. Others will question my choice. They will not understand why a human remains by my side. But I do not care. You have earned this. Marcus nodded. I won't forget it. The queen's aura softened. She looked out over the city, her mind calm for the first time in centuries. We will rebuild, and perhaps strength is not only in fear but also in recognition, in understanding, in seeing what others fail to see. Marcus smiled. I think you're beginning to see it. She turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly. You are still cute, he said softly. The queen froze, then laughed, a deep, resonant sound that echoed across the balcony. Terrifying, yet unexpectedly beautiful. Perhaps, she said, you were right all along. The suns dipped below the horizon, casting a golden-red light over the city. The battle was over. The capital survived. And in the aftermath, a bond formed, not built on fear, not on power, but on understanding and respect. Marcus stood beside her, ready for whatever came next, and the queen, for the first time in her life, allowed herself to be seen, not only as a ruler of terror, but as someone remarkable, recognized by one human who dared to call her cute. It was an ending neither had expected, and yet it was the perfect beginning for what was to come.